a boxing betting expert.
I know, David.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
He really gets into the nitty-gritty of this whole thing.
Scoop, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I don't think you remember, but about 20 years ago, we exchanged a few emails. And so I'm very excited to finally pick this up face to face. There was a period back then when for a few days you were the most famous man on the planet. And I'm going to explain why that is true. And I'm excited to get the inside story about that. But we'll get onto that bit later. First of all, I'd like to know, what is your first boxing memory?
First of all, let me say it's exciting to be here. I thought you did a great interview with Pavi G a few weeks ago. Loved it. So yeah, and your questions, I really liked your questions. So excited to do this. You start off with a great first question. First boxing memory. There's a few really early ones. Seeing the movie Rocky the first time, 1976 in the theater, me and my best friend, Matthew Shapiro, we were young kids at the time, and we said, let's go to the movies. Let's see this movie Rocky. It was about 4 miles from where we lived, and we had no idea what it was. Absolutely no idea. Just went in there blind, and it was like a life-changing movie. Wow. So, yeah, I vaguely remember Ali a little bit before that. I don't remember watching any fights, but that's got to be the first memory. Seeing the film Rocky for the first time and just being totally blown away by it.
And then, so that translated onto the real world. So who would be the first sort of real-time fighter that you had an interest in?
Muhammad Ali, of course.
Yeah.
Larry Holmes became the heavyweight champion after that.
Yeah.
And he was, always on TV. Roberto Duran was the first guy that really stood out that I just embraced and loved. Roberto Duran, the charisma, the excitement, the joy, the passion, the smiling, the connection he had with the fans. I totally fell in love with Duran.
So what an amazing era to discover the sport. Do you look back with sort of rose-tinted glasses and think that was a golden era that we subsequently haven't had, or are you still as much into the sport now in sort of the recent decade?
No, it changed. It changed. Mayweather era kind of. It just nowhere close to the same. You didn't have those super electric fights. Everything seemed kind of softer and more staged, and the interviews were not the same and different energy. Didn't have the same excitement going to the fights or the press conferences. I remember how the excitement of just going to see Bernard Hopkins in a press conference. You never knew what he was going to say, the mind games he was going to work. Yeah. But still keep interested in the sport. They do make the great fights every once in a while. Usyk and Joshua was fantastic. Usyk and Fury was fantastic finally. But too rare that they make the big fights.
So is more of your time in the tennis world than boxing now?
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
And so what about what do you still do with the boxing?
I still have a website, ringobserver.com, and I cover the sport. I write some articles once in a while. I do interviews with boxers once in a while, but the excitement and love for the sport is not the same. But it's still there, but it's just not like it was.
Okay, so I've seen, I did some research before I interviewed you, Scoop, and I've seen some of your footage playing tennis on YouTube. So you're a pretty decent tennis player. That is you playing, right?
Yes. Real name Mark, nickname Scoop. Call me whatever. I can respond to both.
So what sort of level were you playing the tennis at?
4-5 USTA, which is I could play. I've played national tournaments. I've won some rounds in national tournaments. I won a backdraw of a national tournament.
Wow.
I've hit with some former pros.
Yeah.
I've won some points. I've coached a former pro. I coached I coached a current pro. He's still coach cheerleader for the player. And we went 8-3. He won 8 matches with me. A little bit of strategy. And
can you say who that is?
Cheerleading.
Can you say who it is?
Yes, Stefan Kozlov.
Okay, right. And which of the pros have you played?
Pierre Duclos from Canada, he was at the end of his career and he was giving some lessons down here and he was teaching next to us. And I paid him to played some points with him. I played with my Thomas Baruki was 1,000 in the world from Poland. I played some games with him.
Yeah.
Without his serve, with his serve, I couldn't do anything. When we just fed balls and played points, I actually could win some points in some games. And Michelle Larcher de Brito, who was she was 60 in the world at one time, and at the time I hit with her, she was practicing next to me, and I challenged her to a tiebreaker for $50. Like, if you could beat me, I'll give you $50. And I got a game or two off her in a set, and tiebreaker. She beat me in the 2 tiebreakers.
Wow.
But I got a feel for that level. I did okay, but I started late at tennis, and I don't hit the ball hard enough. I'm more of a counterpuncher defensive player.
Right. I mean, that's amazing. I've played a little bit of tennis. I played a top pro in Portugal, and I could barely win a point, let alone a game. And so to get a few games at that level, you're doing something right. So
who was the Portuguese player?
He was I can't name his name. He fell out of love with the game. I'll tell you off camera. What is have you ever boxed?
When I was in junior high school, the movie Rocky, like I said, it was such an impact on my life. We actually started a boxing league, and we set up fights with our group of friends and some other kids in the school. And I did have 3 fights.
Okay.
And I remember the first one was the most nerve-wracking experience I ever had in my life. Just knowing that on Saturday afternoon, I was going to fight this kid 10 rounds.
Wow.
And you think of making excuses to get out of it. I thought of making excuses to get out of it, but finally went through with it. And all I remember is trading punches and not really knowing what to do, but just fighting on instinct, really. You just trying. And then the other kid quit after the 4th round.
Right.
And then when it was over, when I found out he quit, I remember, I'll never forget. I ran down to the bathroom, locked the door in by myself, and just started crying. I was just so relieved that it was over, that I survived this.
So that has obviously given you a lot of respect for the fighters, and in the books of yours that I've read, the respect that you
the highest respect of any athlete. These guys are the ultimate. I mean, you get chills. I remember being at fights and just getting chills and shaking before the fights.
Yeah. And it's not only the respect you have for the fighters, but you also have a certain sort of disdain for journalists who dare to call these incredibly brave human beings chicken. And, I think Lennox Lewis got a lot of bad press in the States, and you were always very like, hold on, you cannot question this man for what he's doing.
Well, not Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis is one of the greatest ever. But the thing is, after Mayweather, there are a lot of chickens now in sport. They do duck the big fights. They don't take the high risk fights. Tank Davis, he's dodged these guys for 5 years now.
Yeah.
Canelo is ducking Benavidez. The rematch of Bivol. Deontay Wilder didn't win a fight. Joshua or Usyk. Fury tried to duck Usyk, and then he finally got forced into it by the Saudi Arabian guy. So ducking and dodging and taking the path of least resistance to not lose is kind of the way boxing is now, especially for the top American fighters. So there actually are a lot of chickens now. But back then, no. There's the first chicken I remember was maybe Roy Jones kind of got into that when he got the HBO contract, when he guaranteed contract, and he would just pick his opponents, and he didn't want to fight Antonio Tarver, and he was trying to dodge Tarver. But Tarver was like Muhammad Ali. He just kept talking and hounding him, doing interviews, and he was a great talker, and he forced Roy Jones to fight him. And so that was kind of when boxing, and then Mayweather came along, and then it changed. But yeah, it is hard to call a fighter a chicken or a duck, but the way it is now, it happens. So
do you think that Tarver result would have been the same if it was like 5 years earlier against Roy Jones Jr.?
Yep. I think Antonio Tarver, just for some reason, was not spooked by Roy. He was not intimidated, but he sparred with him early when they were still amateurs, I think. So he's familiar with him. And he just always had that total confidence that he could beat him.
Yeah.
Just like Muhammad Ali had that total confidence that he was going to beat George Foreman. Even when George Foreman knocked out Ken Norton after Ali said that he thought Norton was going to beat him.
Yeah.
Ali just still was never really psyched out by Foreman.
Yeah. So who would you put as your most sort of favorite since getting into the sport and watching Larry Holmes, Ali, and Duran? Who would be your favorite since then, sort of 90s onwards?
Oh my gosh, so many. I loved Lennox Lewis, Bernard Hopkins, Roberto Duran, Golovkin, the Klitschko's, Prince Nassim Hamed, Antonio Tarver. What he did to Roy Jones, that was unbelievable. He doesn't get that's kind of forgotten now. What he did for him to knock out Roy Jones like that was, it's kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
There's been so many. So many. And plus, I got to do biophile interviews with all of them, and I got to meet them. Many. Andrew Galata.
Oh, Galata! Wow, yeah. What a talent he had. What about did you meet the Klitschko's?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've interviewed both of them. Yep.
And many.
I was friendly with Vladimir. We were exchanging emails every time we would. Yeah, he gave me a lot of interesting insights. I asked him one time if he thought that Tony Thompson could beat Joe Frazier, and I said no. I said I think the media doesn't give Tony Thompson any respect. You beat this guy's a tough, tall, lefty, long. I think this guy could beat Joe Frazier and a lot of those guys and he agreed with me.
Tony Thompson, who was he?
He was the guy that was like a tall lefty, little known American, low stature, like an outsider, but he got 2 title shots against Klitschko. He got to the mandatory, and Klitschko had to fight him, but he was a really hard guy to fight. He was taller than Klitschko. He's a lefty, good jab, and they were tough, tricky fights.
Right.
And Klitschko beat him both times, but I remember one time I asked him, he told me he was really impressed by Thompson's confidence at the press conference.
Wow.
And he beat him twice impressively, but he didn't get any credit for it.
Yeah.
And I said, geez, the media doesn't give you any appreciation for beating this guy. And this guy probably is better than Joe Frazier, just because he's so tall, 6'8", whatever, 6'8", 6'7", whatever he was. Joe Frazier would have been a very hard time to fight a guy like that. Joe Frazier's like 5'11".
Yeah, on a good day, yeah. And so the Klitschko's came around after a really strong era. So it's very tough for them, I think, to really have the fans warm to them. So you mentioning them as 2 of your favorites, that's quite an unusual view. Not many people, when they go back over the last few years, do put those guys on a pedestal, despite their records and their undefeated reigns and what they did.
The establishment didn't really want them to be in the top. It was after Lennox Lewis, and then they succeeded Lennox Lewis. The establishment didn't want them. Don King was trying to freeze them out to keep the titles with John Ruiz and Chris Bird, but they overcame that all, and they never got all 4 of the titles because the politics stopped them from doing that. But yeah, it was an amazing story. 2 brothers, 2 doctors who take over the heavyweight division. Yeah, should have made movies about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Plus, they were gentlemen. They were gentlemen, great ambassadors for the sport.
Yeah.
They were different styles. It was like a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah, right. They should have been, bigger stars. And I guess in America, people would probably not even tune into some of their fights. They fought in Germany most of the time.
HBO said, we don't want to pay for the expenses to travel, so they didn't televise the fight. Yeah, some of the fights weren't even televised, but you got to show the heavyweight championship of the heavyweight champions fighting.
Crazy. So what about, I want to get onto some of the sort of the behind the scenes stuff, some of the press conferences, but what about fights you've seen live, either sort of ringside or just at the venue, standout best fights you've seen?
I have a different answer for that, because I remember Marlon Starling told me, I always ask the fighters in a Biofile interview, what's your favorite fights? And Marlon Starling told me, he changed my view on it. Marlon Starling told me, I don't like fights that are great fights where they brawl and they hurt each other and beat the hell out of each other. I prefer fights where they're more scientific boxing, where the other guy outboxes and dissects the guy. Favorite fights, the miracle of Foreman Lyle, of course. I mean, no, I don't think anything can top that. But then also a great fight is also Bernard Hopkins against Tito Trinidad in Madison Square Garden. The energy in the arena that night was unbelievable.
Wow.
I loved watching Prince Nassim Hamed. His ring entrance when he would come to the ring in those fights in England, how he would respond, how the fans responded to him, and he would feed off of that energy, that positive energy. And then when he got to America, the American fans didn't understand him, and I thought he was inhibited. He didn't fight the same way.
Yeah.
Lennox Lewis had some masterpieces. Just looking at him walking to the ring with that Bob Marley music, man, his ring entrances were awesome to watch. Lennox Lewis against Razor Ruddock, that was the one that put him on the map. Just blew out Razor Ruddock like he was nothing.
Yeah. So let's talk about Lennox, because I've been reading your book, and it's brilliant. It's the ultimate guide to the Tyson Lewis fight in 2002, and I've done gone back memory lane to look at it all. I was watching it again this morning. Lennox ring walk there, completely focused. Mike Tyson completely does not have his game face on. For me, the writing was on the wall.
But because he was probably psyched out, he never really wanted to fight Lennox Lewis. He knew he was probably gonna lose.
Yeah. So
Lennox Lewis was an intimidating guy.
Yeah. And so on that, a few questions that specifically from the book and the build up to that fight, and sort of your hands-on experience that have been around it. Now, you're obviously a massive Lennox fan. Everyone seems to be a massive Lennox fan, rightly so. You have a great line of doing a Cecil B. DeMille in reverse of how his management could have ruined him early doors. Now, for me, there's two stages of Lennox Lewis. There's the pre-defeat Lennox, when he's quite aggressive, and Manny Stewart's talking about him being the future #1 all time, better than Ali. And then he lost. Manny Stewart took over, and he became very sort of safety first. Now, do you think there's some question marks around his legacy because of that, or for me, I just wish we could have seen what could have been with Lennox if it stayed a little bit more aggressive in that second half of his career.
No, he avenged both those losses impressively too. He got knocked out twice, and he came back and beat both guys decisively twice. Yeah. I think it was more of a thing where Lennox Lewis made mistakes going into those fights. The McCall fight, the first McCall fight, McCall trained in Mexico, altitude. He was unbelievable shape. Emmanuel Stewart was with him at the time. And I'll never forget, he was at the press conference in London. I just happened to see it on TV. McCall was so confident. I'm going to knock you out. I'm going to knock you out. And Lennox Lewis was like looking at him, like absorbing it. I'll never forget that. You remember that?
Yeah.
And it was so convincing. Yeah. McCall's confidence was so convincing. It spooked Lennox. And he caught with that punch, and he was out. And then he maybe didn't take him seriously enough, or he had a little problem with complacence. He did the same thing with Rockman. He was filming the film in Las Vegas, and then he got to South Africa late, didn't adapt to the altitude.
Yeah,
he got knocked out. Somebody told me a week before the fight, one of the guys who went over there with him with Main Events, the promoter, said that he tried jogging a week before the fight, and he had to stop after he couldn't do the whole thing. The altitude really bothered him. So to get knocked out by a guy and to beat the guy by knockout in the rematch is an amazing thing. He doesn't get enough credit for that. So no, I'm not going to hold his two bad nights against him. The rest of his career, beat everybody he ever fought. He really can be the greatest of all time. Yeah.
So I mean, I think for me, the class that when he was beating Tyson, and he had Tyson beat, after a couple of rounds, but he was still just reluctant to engage. Manny Stewart's begging him to put Tyson away. And, in the Holyfield fights, having had that draw in the first fight, in the second fight, he still didn't really just make sure to take it out of the second fight was arguably closer than the first one. So, yeah. And then a couple of Zelko Mavrovich and a couple of these guys where you just you should be putting these people away. But yeah,
those
for me,
tough. That guy Mavrovich was tough, man. He was those Corway.
Yeah,
what was that? He gave a hell of a fight, and I don't think he ever fought again after that. That fight took everything out of him. But Holyfield was crafty and smart, and Tyson at that point was a shell of himself. He was nowhere near the same that he was.
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's move into this whole Tyson.
Though he was still dangerous, though. Mike Tyson is still dangerous. He was desperate. He was still dangerous in that fight, but Lewis knew how to handle him.
I think in those sort of early 2000 fights with Tyson, you can just see his stamina just go after 3 minutes. Like that first round against Lewis, he's all there for like even 2 minutes of the round, and then by the end of 3 minutes, he just looks spent. He's just he just didn't have the tank. So
the confidence wasn't there either. He kind of got fed a lot of Don King Showtime patsies for the contract, so the confidence wasn't what it was 1986, 88.
Yeah. So on to the build up to the Lewis Tyson fight, and I'm intrigued to get some of your takes on this. So again, in the book, you're really impartial, but there's a clear theme that you're as you're watching the post-prison 1995, 1996 version of Mike Tyson, you're unimpressed. You're seeing flaw. He's winning. He's beating all these guys by knockout, but you're seeing a lot of rust, a lot of bad timing, a lot of bad footwork. The most exciting thing about the McNeely fight was the stare down when Tyson's doing his eye thing. And then McNeely obviously gets pulled out. So then he comes up against Holyfield on this string of victories. Again, it looked good against Bruno, relatively speaking. Then he's in with Holyfield as a 22-1 favorite. Had you seen something that made you pick Holyfield by that point, or what did you feel about that fight?
Yeah, I remember Lou Duva bet a lot of money on Holyfield in the first fight, and that's interesting. When that made the news, I remember it was mentioned in Boxing News, and then this is a while ago. I haven't really thought of this in a long time, but I remember the first press conference they had for Holyfield and Tyson.
Yeah,
Holyfield was working the mind games on Tyson. He made some comment about jail, and he was. Geez, I wrote the book over 10 years ago, but he made some kind of comments that really triggered Tyson and got him pissed off, and it kind of showed that Holyfield had the mental edge on Tyson.
Yeah,
he was not just the 30. I think he was 30-1 underdog.
Yeah,
he was not just going to show up as the patsy to take the beating. He was actually coming to whoop Tyson. Yeah. And Tyson got that feeling, and he got offended by it and got pissed. And so that was an interesting moment.
Yeah, it was. Holyfield was just saying that he came from the same background, that he comes from a tough background, and that Tyson, the way you beat him, is just applying the bully mentality, saying you fight him back, he can't take it. And then Tyson started in that era, as you're all too familiar with. Tyson just threw out some of that jail talk. You got nothing coming. That was, he's going to have fun. It was all that shit. So he was
you triggered. Now I remember. Holyfield said the way you got to beat Tyson is you can't just box him. Sometimes you got to fight him.
Yeah.
You get him in the morning, you got to fight him. Then you box him, and he goes, "No, I'm never really totally impressed by Tyson. I've been everywhere he has been except for jail."
Yeah.
And that's when Tyson exploded and stood up and started pointing and started yelling at Holyfield. Yeah. So you knew right then Holyfield could get into his head.
Yeah. So again, we talk about the sort of the two stages of a career. The post prison Tyson. Do you think he was just a shell of his former self?
Yeah, he was never even after Robin Givens, he was not the same. And then Don King, the exploitation and the humiliation of going to jail, being the whole world considering you a rapist, it took a toll on him. He was not the same. And I think a lot of those fights that he had with Showtime and at the MGM Grand were kind of set up for him to win. Yeah. And then it got real with the Holyfield fight, and Don King had control of both of them at the time, and I guess just let it happen and see what happens. And Holyfield, incredible night, and prevailed.
Yeah.
But, Holyfield, Tyson was nowhere near the same of what he was 86. That was the most exciting fighter we've ever seen in the history of the sport.
Yeah. So do you think it would have been a different result, Holyfield Tyson, if it had happened 5 years earlier?
Sometimes, yeah, I do. Sometimes I don't, because Holyfield seemed to always get extra inspired and motivated.
Yeah.
Holyfield was something special too.
Oh yeah, Holyfield's my favorite of that era. So now moving forward a little bit. So
what's your reaction when you watch that round with Riddick Bowe in the first fight when he's out on his feet? Yeah, that's Holyfield's defining moment.
But I mean, I'd love to see what Holyfield would like. Holyfield doesn't get the recognition. I think people think that he was, he maybe moved up to heavyweight through a little bit of assistance, if you know what I mean. So I think he's a little bit, his reputation is a bit tarnished, but I'd love to know what he would be capable of doing in the modern era, given that people consider him to be small. But yeah, I think he's every single one of his fights, he walked into that ring like he knew he should be the massive favorite, regardless of who he's fighting. And I just absolutely love that in him. But again,
a class guy too, total class, great, just ultimate respect for that guy.
Yeah, no smack talking. And although again, something that I learned from your book is that when they were going to make the first Lewis Holyfield fight, didn't he up his fee by $5 million just to say, wait, maybe I don't want this fight? So is there potential that Lennox Lewis was ultimately ducked by Riddick Bowe, Mike Tyson, and Evander Holyfield, and that were his main rivals in his era?
Don King. I think Don King was in control of Holyfield's career at that time, so you got to think that he was a factor in that.
Right. Yeah. King didn't want his guys fighting Lennox. So now apparently, again, this is you are the source that Lennox even offered Tyson $50 million for a fight in 1995, and they walked away. And then didn't they give him step aside like a $4 million step aside fee rather than fight him?
Yeah. Everything I put in the book was documented. Yeah, I followed that really, really closely. Yeah, Lennox was the bogeyman. No, he was the intimidating guy. Nobody wanted to fight him. The top guys didn't want to fight him.
But it's crazy. $50 million. He walked away from $50 million. And do you
even Rockman and Don King tried to avoid the rematch.
Yeah,
they got forced legally into that fight.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
McCall didn't. McCall got forced into the rematch, and look what he did. He didn't want to fight him either.
Yeah, and do you have any insights on whether? I think this has come out a lot recently since Foreman died recently, but the potential for a Foreman Tyson fight back then. Do you have any idea of how close that ever got, or even in a mythical matchup, how that might have gone?
That's a good question. That's a mystery why that didn't happen. My theory is, I think they were both A+ sides. Yeah. They're both big draws, and they both just decided, the promoters on both sides and each fighter just decided, let's keep it apart. We could make a lot of money just fighting other guys than fighting each other. Yeah. I don't think they really wanted to fight each other. There was really no grudge there.
Yeah,
it would have been an interesting fight for sure. I got to think Tyson would have won at that point. I think Tyson was the more technically sound fighter, sharper punches. But Foreman, it would have been interesting.
It'd be an amazing clash of styles, like one of the most impressive hand speeds we've seen in the heavyweight division against the slowest hand speed we've seen in the heavyweight division, and it would have been a fascinating fight. So.
But there was just no grudge factor there. I think they both respect each other so much.
Yeah. So, okay. So is that we're early April now. The original Tyson Lewis fight was scheduled for early April 2002, and then it was delayed a few months because of that New York press conference. Now, Tyson had his. He didn't have his, after that press conference. He had Nevada did not renew his license. So they ended up fighting in, was it the Pyramid? What venue was that?
Memphis, Tennessee.
So, can you just talk in as much or as little detail as you're prepared to do, because it's probably a story that you've told many times. But you went to the press conference in January 2002 in New York, and you said you could feel a tension in the air. Something was going off already. And then I'd like you just to explain how you decided to interact in that press conference, what motivated you to do it, how you felt during that moment, because I'm going to share the link to what happened there. And it still is a goosebumps moment of the most extraordinary few minutes in boxing press conference history. It's so shocking that when I've shared it on social media before, I literally put warnings up because people don't talk the way that not like that anymore. So Scoop, in your words, can you just talk me through how that went down?
First thing I want to say is I got friends and even new friends who find out about it and they end up sending to me the reactions that they have of when they find out that it happened is a huge laugh. Okay, going back to that time, 20 years ago. Wow, 22 years ago. Yeah, it was huge excitement to go to that press conference. I remember it was a cloudy, cold day. Dark, there was no sun that day, and wow, this is finally happening. Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson, the press conference after all these years of delays and not happening. It's finally so there was a huge excitement to be there, and then we're waiting, and then Tyson, they announced him. They made the big announcement. Lennox comes out, big fancy production. Then Tyson came out, and then Tyson, tried to intimidate. He walked right to his face because they kept him like 20 feet apart. Tried to get in his face, and I believe to intimidate him because he knew Lennox had the mental edge, and then he tried to do something to scare Lennox Lewis, to see fear, to build his own confidence, and then Lennox was not intimidated at all. And then Lennox Lewis threw the punch at him, and then the ball. He said, "I'm not going to wait for Mike Tyson to hit me." And then they had the brawl there, and then it was just total chaos. They were rolling around the stage. Everybody ran up there, the curtains, and then they disappeared. And like, what the hell is happening? Nobody knew what was happening. And then after like a minute, Tyson emerges from behind the curtain, and Lennox Lewis was. Nobody knew where he was, or if he was knocked out cold or whatever. It was crazy. And then Tyson came out like acting like he just won something, sneering and grabbing his nuts. And first thing I did was I booed him. I just boo, and he heard it and he hated that. And he looked at me and tried to intimidate me and shut me down. And then like 30 seconds later, he was still up there acting like that. And I just put him in a straitjacket, and that's what triggered it.
No, so when Mike Tyson's staring you in the eye, you got two options there: say nothing or say something. You chose to escalate. You chose to. So, like, what did you see that made you double down on that original boo? I didn't know there was a boo originally, so you booed, and then there was a straitjacket comment.
Yep, and then he targeted me, and he was for 2 seconds I was like paralyzed. Oh my god! But then instinct, I don't even remember if I wrote this in the book, but I had an experience when I was an intern in college. I was a media intern with the New Jersey Devils, and one night out of nowhere, at a game, the owner of the team, the son of the owner of the team, Peter McMullen, and the owner was John McMullen, the owner of the New Jersey Devils, just started verbally berating me. I don't even remember why. Like outside the press room before the game. I didn't feel I did anything wrong, but he was like verbally berating me, and I just stood there like blank with a stoic face, blank. I said nothing. I just stood there looking him in the eye the whole time. And I remember he all of a sudden started feeling like an idiot.
Yeah.
And that's what the same thing happened with Tyson. When Tyson started for like 2 seconds, like, holy, you don't want to show weakness. So you just stand there blank, up, look at him. And then by the end of it, I thought he was the one who was kind of hurt and showing weakness. But let me just say, that whole thing was a long ordeal, and I always loved Tyson. A little bit, hated some of the things he did, but always huge, tremendous respect for what that guy has done. Come on, the ultimate story of from nothing to the
Yeah.
top of the world,
Yeah.
rock bottom 3 times, and still builds himself up.
Yeah.
And got some newspaper interviews. Colin Hart called from London. I remember for the Sun. He did an interview with me and other places. So it was always on my mind every day. And I remember one time I was driving in the car and I actually felt I actually cried a little because I felt so bad for having caused such
Wow.
bad moment for one of the greatest fighters of all time.
That's fascinating. Wow. Okay. But I think so that's amazing. That's lovely. But also I think what you were doing there is it was your love and respect for the sport. You just thought somebody needs to he was getting away with it, and you thought and not that you were going to stop him getting away with it, but you couldn't help yourself from saying what you felt, that this is this. And I think Lennox's mother was in the crowd, and there was all sorts of reasons. I think there was legally Tyson had committed like several crimes in that half-hour period. So I think you were doing the right thing. But it must. So did you have that evening, that afternoon? Did you have a sort of a come down of adrenaline where you just like, whoa, what just happened there? Because it must have been scary after the fact.
Yeah, I remember after that going to fights and other media industry people. The way they treated me differently. Got respect. I thought it was respect. They looked at me. I remember Mike Katz. Mike Katz looked at me. The New York Daily News.
Wow.
And other people too. Respect. Yeah, I think it all worked out in the end. The fight didn't get delayed. It was a biggest money fight in history. I don't even know if I mentioned in the book, but a few years later, I actually had dinner with Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
We met at the Leroy Neiman Memorial because we were both really good friends with Leroy Neiman.
Okay.
We were at the memorial, and then we went out to dinner at a mutual friend's bar and restaurant, and we talked boxing and tennis. And then another time, I did an interview with him about tennis. So yeah, Mario, our mutual friend Mario Costa, was the manager of Arturo Gatti, and he owns that bar ringside in Jersey City.
Okay.
He told me Mike doesn't hold any grudges. He tells me a lot of inside information about Mike, what he's doing now and how life is going. His daughter is a really serious tennis player. He tells me really inside information. Tyson's doing great, by the way. It's an amazing thing that he has turned his life from. Remember, didn't I think George Foreman or Oscar De La Hoya said they think he might commit, or Larry Holmes said they think he might commit suicide, and he's built himself up into a huge positive force again.
Yeah,
that's incredible that he's done that.
You often see him courtside at the U.S. Open. He's a big Djokovic fan. I think there's a lot of and I think he got caught stealing the ice cream at U.S. Open at one of the kiosks in Ash Stadium. And I asked Mario about that, and he said his wife doesn't let him carry a cell phone or any money. Wow!
So that's why he had to take the ice cream, and ended up making a news story.
That's hilarious.
But she didn't let him carry any money or a phone because that way he couldn't get in any trouble.
He's a fascinating character, and again, doing my research about this interview and that fight, and what he said in that press conference, and just a matter of months later, seeing how respectful he was in defeat to Lennox Lewis. It's so hard to put these two characters. That person is the same as this person. They're so. It's like this. The tough guy Tyson doing all that prison talk. Is that just your act? And actually, you're that nice guy who's wiping blood off Lennox's face and kissing his mother. Is that the real Tyson? And you're just a brilliant salesman, or a bit of both.
He obviously has a heart of gold. But in the sport of boxing, you also have to be a lion and a monster and a beast.
Yeah,
you had to be both. But that was shocking. The graciousness that he showed in defeat, but also he lost so much because He earned about over $30 million for that fight, but he was still going to be in massive debt, even despite making $30 million.
Yeah.
And his leverage and value as a fighter after that loss went way down. So he knew he was going to have trouble making big money after that loss.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why the rematch didn't happen, because he knew he had no chance.
Yeah, exactly. And his level of.
So to show that kind of graciousness in defeat with all those factors against him, incredible.
That was one of the most end of era experiences I've had as a sports fan, seeing Tyson in that post-fight interview with Lennox. I was like, we thought he was done a few years ago, but he's absolutely done. And it's incredible. It's a very somber sort of emotional exit speech by him. One thing that I thought was very interesting as well in the book is that you were there, and when he took his hat off and he made that move on Lennox, and Lennox's security jumps in, Tyson throws a left hand, but it misses by about a foot, and it's like Mike Tyson doesn't miss punches by a foot. He may be shot, but he's not missing by that much, and like that was a premeditated act of aggression that was designed not to cause any damage as well. So it's like he's sort of like in his moments of absolute mayhem and chaos, he still knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time. But,
I mean,
yeah.
he misses
Missed it on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that amused me as well is, do you know? If you've got any inside info on this one, people are going to love it. Do you know what happened to Crocodile Steve Fitch, whatever his name was?
Somebody told me something years ago, but I can't remember. I don't remember.
Oh, wow. He was a character.
He vanished, though. He vanished like Bundini Brown.
You put in your book that somebody had said, what does he put on for his tax returns? What does he put for his job description?
Cheerleader.
Yeah.
But hey, I know tennis players and boxers need that. Yeah. They need that extra energy.
Yeah. Well, it's all those guys as well. What happened? Like John Horn, Rory Holloway, all those guys that were around Tyson there, they just disappeared. They absolutely disappeared.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. That was amazing. So,
but Tyson is still friends. His best friend is Mario Costa.
Who's that?
Mario Costa is a Portuguese guy who owns the Ringside Lounge in Jersey City.
Okay.
He used to be the manager of Arturo Gatti. They are great friends. Mario said he never asked him for anything.
Yeah.
They're just great friends. He knows him since the Camille Ewald and Customato days. Yeah. So they are really close.
Nice.
He's probably Tyson's best friend. Whenever Tyson comes east to New York and New Jersey, he always visits the Ringside.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. In fact, Mario keeps his 300 pigeons in a coop behind the bar in the back.
Right. Nice. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Q. That was amazing. So just back to sort of the more general stuff on the boxing. If obviously it's a controversial sport, if there was one rule that you could change to improve the sport, something that's frustrated you over the years, what rule would you change or add to the sport?
No ducking and dodging. When they have the big fight ready to be made, they got to force the guy they have to make the fight happen. When it's other rules, I can't really say anything. I think it's fine the way it is, but just make the best fights, make the best fight the best, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah. And okay, so is there a fight from 2024 last year that we were blessed with lots? You mentioned a few. If you could pick one from last year as your highlight that you enjoyed the most, which one would it be?
I still like to watch the replays of the old fights on YouTube sometimes. But Usyk but I didn't watch it live. I watched the replay.
Oh,
Usyk
really?
And Fury. Yeah. Can't really think. The fights just don't seem as electric and real like they did back. You don't get those shocking knockouts like where the money fighter gets knocked, like Roy Jones get knocked out by Tarver. That just never happened. The big money fighters never lose like that anymore. Canelo is never gonna. Canelo is just never gonna lose. I can. Yeah, I just like to rewatch old fights like Duran. I still watch Duran versus Moore.
Right.
Once a year, once every 2 years. Duran Leonard won in Montreal. Is still just it's unbelievable. No fight today compares to that.
Yeah, it's crazy watching them back. It seems almost like it's a work of fiction compared to what we get now. But is there a fight that you would watch live if it was made in 2025? If you could do the matchmaking, what fight would you make this year?
If it was in Madison Square Garden, not too much of a travel. Crawford Canelo. If Crawford Canelo would be really interesting if it was a real fight and the pre-fight had a lot of mind games and instead of talking like they're business partners, and if Crawford wasn't polite, like Canelo says he wants his opponents all to be polite. That's why he wouldn't fight Benavidez, because he wasn't polite enough.
Yeah.
If you knew that was a real fight and it started getting heated with some trash talking in the media, like the way it used to happen with Hopkins, that fight probably, yep. Or I like this guy from Kazakhstan, Zanabek Alamkanule. He seems like he's like the new Golovkin. This guy from Eastern Europe who's just a monster, just destroying everybody, but the big names just run away from him. If he was to get it.
He fought last weekend, didn't he?
Yep, knockout.
Brutal. Yeah.
I don't think he's ever going to get the fight against Canelo. They're going to freeze him out like they should. Like they probably felt they should have frozen Golovkin out, but they just couldn't freeze Golovkin out.
Yeah, Canelo's at that stage. Okay, so who do you think is the most overrated boxer that's been sort of a high profile since you
Mayweather.
Okay.
Yeah, Mayweather.
Okay, and
I remember Sugar Ray Leonard. I remember Sugar Ray Leonard said once a long time ago, but he won't say it anymore because it's too controversial and he'll get too much criticism for it. But he said that Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Floyd Mayweather Sr. were the same level.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most extraordinary boxing take I've ever heard in my life.
But he won't say it anymore.
Wow.
They all got to play along with Mayweather, the best ever. Even though he ducked Pacquiao for 6 years, he wouldn't fight Margarito, wouldn't fight Paul Williams, wouldn't fight Sergio Martinez, wouldn't fight Cotto until Cotto was a free agent and not with Arum. And when Cotto had some losses and needed the payday.
Yeah. Wow. That's I feel we should wrap this up now. I mean, that's incredible. Never heard anything like that. Okay. So back to the heavyweights. Who have you got at number one all time? And who's your number one best heavyweight of all time?
Fluctuates different days. Some days I think it's Lennox Lewis, but then I think it could be the Klitschko's or one of the Klitschko's or the other Klitschko. They were super dominant.
Yeah.
Then also some days I think Mike Tyson at his best. Those 2 years, 86, 80, 88, 89, unbeatable guy. Just nobody. Geez, guys would show up to spar with him and would look at him punch in the bag and shadow box, and they'd leave. They wouldn't even get in the ring with him. They'd get in the ring with him and got hit with a few punches, and they ran through the ropes and left the gym, didn't even collect their $2,000.
Yeah.
So those guys, I think Tyson Fury had the potential to be the greatest of all time. Mm-hmm. If he would have had the discipline like Holyfield and Novak Djokovic and took care of his body and always stayed in shape, 6'9", the skills and the moves that he had, I really think he was an unbeatable guy.
Yeah.
I think he could have been the greatest of all time.
Yeah. Okay. So apart from Lennox and Tyson Fury and Hamed, you've mentioned, given a lot of respect for Nassim Hamed, other British fighters that you've been impressed by?
Calzaghe.
Yeah.
But we didn't really get the full feel for Calzaghe over here. He was more based over there. But we saw him with Hopkins and Jones, and he doesn't get the credit for those wins. But those were awesome victories. They kind of say, he beat them when they were old and all, but come on, those guys got fired up for that fight. They wanted to beat this guy from England. They couldn't do it. Some of the I love Hamed. Those ring injuries of Hamed. Man, he was like a little miniature Muhammad Ali. Yeah. Even more so. He was man. I just love the music. The music that he played in those ring entries. I used to go out and buy that music and listen to it. It would pump me up.
Awesome. Yeah.
can't think of anybody else.
No, Calzaghe gets a lot of respect. Like I've yet to meet someone who's been critical of Joe Calzaghe. I'm a huge fan of Calzaghe as well.
Perfect career.
Yeah, I do think he got those the Hopkins and the Jones fight a little bit too late. I do think they would have been slightly different fights a few years earlier. Roy Jones was not the same guy. Yeah, he may have been up for it, but he was not. He wasn't the same guy. And
they took the payday and they took the chance. They had the belief.
Yeah,
they miscalculated though.
And look, who's to say Calzaghe had a very difficult style to overcome. You know, he was born to fight. He was an extraordinary. I loved his career. Okay, so
I remember the press conference when he came and he fought Jeff Lacey. He came for I think it was his first time ever in American press conference was at Gallagher's gym. I did a biofile interview with him that day too.
Oh yeah,
I'll never forget he was very polite and well mannered, but he was dressed in like this George Michael denim black leather jacket. Kind of looked like a thug like guy, but he was acting like a gentleman. Said all the right things, and they had to stare down after. Man, he gave that look to. Then he put the game face on, and he gave that look to straight to Lacey's face, and whoa, this guy's got some beast in him.
Wow.
It was a very memorable day.
He
totally destroyed him.
I saw him train before he fought Omar Shaker in the UK, and I went to film. I was doing some journalism, and I went to film him training, and I was in the ring with him and his father. I was on the ring apron filming him. And he was, he's a super middleweight, a 12-stone man. He doesn't look like a ferocious beast, but it remains the most extreme piece of violence I've ever seen. Just that close. I mean, the amount of violence this man was able to commit right in front of me was extraordinary. Yeah.
In the training or the fight? The training or the fight?
Just the training. Just because I was literally a meter away with my camera filming him. To be that close. I'm like, wow, it's the filter off the TV and even the safety of your seats, in the arena. Being that close, I was just blown away. And he was, a middleweight who wasn't even known for his power was still capable of that. So you saying he could flick this switch with the stare down. Yeah, I get that.
What was it like? Was it like a human tornado?
Yeah, just just speed and power combined that I didn't realize. I've seen a few sort of Grand National horses that are, these horses that cost like £8 million and stuff up close. And when you see them, they look like they're designed by AI. They're so perfect. And it's a bit like that when you get up to something, you just, I didn't realize how different it is to like what you see elsewhere. So give me any sort of standout pieces of shocking sportsmanship you've seen in the sport that's made you question your love for the sport of boxing.
The way Mayweather disrespected Pacquiao before the fight, and for the years to duck him, calling him a drug cheat, and he said a lot of bad things about Pacquiao. Talk the BS about him, but then he wouldn't fight him. Yeah, I really lost so much respect for Mayweather. The way he would talk bad about opponents, and then he knew he was gonna. It's like he knew he was gonna win, so he could talk that way anyway. But then when he had the times where you got to fight these guys who could have given him trouble, like Margarito, Cotto, Paul Williams, Sergio Martinez, Golovkin at 154, he didn't step up to the plate.
Yeah.
Tyson, some bad moments, but it all got erased by the Lennox Lewis fight. How he handled that, everything's forgotten. I don't remember anything really bad sportsmanship.
Yeah. Okay, and what about any standout favorite boxing quotes?
One Bernard Hopkins said, when he was like him against the establishment. You remember those years, like the establishment was trying to take his titles away and make him fight these guys nobody wanted to fight, and he was unified. The establishment was trying to take his titles away, and they didn't want him being in the top spot in boxing. And he had that kind of chip on his shoulder against the boxing media, which was controlled by the boxing establishment. And I remember every one of his press conferences was just awesome to be to. You never knew what he was going to say, and he was going to psych out the opponent, and he was talking to the industry people at the same time. He was a genius. Yeah. And I remember he said, ain't nothing could break my spirit. Yeah. Ain't nothing could break my spirit. That's really inspiring. So whenever I always remember that quote, as an inspiration for also my life also.
I can, when you say it, I can hear it in his voice. Absolutely. Yeah.
Ain't nothing to break my spirit. Yeah.
So, apart from your own, and I can't recommend this highly enough, I'm absolutely loving it. But apart from your own books, is there a boxing book that you would recommend to viewers?
I've read so many of them, and there's so many classics. Thank you for the compliments of my book. But I love the Jack Dempsey book, Roaring Twenties,
Okay.
by Roger Kahn. I loved the fight about Foreman Ali fight by Norman Mailer.
Yeah.
Ooh, I love that Lennox Lewis. I love all the books on Lennox Lewis. I love the Roberto Duran book. I found the Roberto Duran. There's a book on Duran. I Am Duran. I didn't even know it was written.
Okay.
I found it in a bookstore in Sarasota, Florida last year. Unbelievable book. Great book.
I Am Duran. Okay.
So many. I mean, they're all. I only remember very few that I didn't like.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so the first book of yours I read was the Facing Djokovic one, which was a brilliant insight into, because Djokovic doesn't get the credit he deserves from most people, but this book that you put together was how his peers see him, so fellow pros, people inside the sport, and that is where you get the truest reflection of his sort of talents and his personality. And I thought that was a brilliant insight. And all these players just saying of all the players, Novak is number one. So just before we finish, can you just talk to me a little bit about what you're doing in tennis now, and what do you think of Novak and where he stands in the pantheon of greats, not just in tennis but in other sports as well?
Well, I just finished this book last week. It's called the Sarasota Open Experience. Okay. It's about the Sarasota Open ATP Challenger, which I'm going to be going to after this today. It's happening this week. It's like a minor league tennis tournament, but I've been covering it for like 10 years, and it's a great tournament. It's the level of play is the same as you see on TV in the Grand Slams. It's just the players ranked from like 80 in the world to like 400 in the world.
Yeah.
But I just finished that book. Djokovic, I think Djokovic, ultimate respect for him. I think he's the greatest champion in the history of all sports, any sports. Just incredible what this guy's overcome. He's part Muhammad Ali, he's part Michael Jordan, part Lennox Lewis, part Mike Tyson. He's just amazing. He's a funny guy. He's charisma. He's super intelligent. He stands up for what he believes in. He wouldn't take that drug shot. And he was willing to sacrifice his whole career for that. He overcame the two greatest champions in the history of tennis at their best. And he's still going strong. At 30, he's going to turn 38 this year.
Yeah.
I just finished a book, and I also just finished recently a book on my old friend Leroy Neiman, the artist.
Oh, yeah.
Similar to the style of my other books. I just collect stories and memories and anecdotes from people in sports and boxing and media who knew Leroy Neiman, and he's a great figure in art and sports, and shouldn't be forgotten. He was a great friend of mine too for 20 years.
Okay, yeah, I haven't heard of him, but I think just how you describe Novak just there in that brief sort of 20-second is like a perfect summation of exactly, to put him, to list him amongst those greats is, that's what we're dealing with right now. And I think he will be very badly missed when he hangs it up in a few years, because what he's doing is extraordinary.
Yeah, but we thought the same thing after Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi were done. Thought, oh boy, tennis is in trouble. But then who emerged? Federer and Nadal emerged. Yeah. So after Djokovic departs, whenever that is, you got to think it could get even better. As hard as that is to believe.
If Novak picks up another slam at 37 or 38, I can't see any of these young guys now being around in their late 30s. I think the game, they play just too much. I think longevity will be a thing of the past in tennis because they just play too much. Novak's something special.
Tennis has a way of being unpredictable. Nobody thought Federer and Nadal were going to come along and do what they did.
Yeah.
And you got to think, Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic have inspired a lot of young players.
Oh yeah.
And they're gonna like this guy Mensick and this Brazilian guy Fonseca is just electrifying stadiums everywhere he plays.
Right.
Have you seen him play yet?
No.
Oh yeah, he's a sensation. João Fonseca from Brazil.
Right. What's his style?
What's that?
What's his style? How does he play?
Huge forehand. He hits the forehand. He's 18 years old and he already hits the biggest forehand.
Wow. Okay.
Just hits the forehand so big, and also he's a two-handed backhand, and he has a charisma on the court that the Brazilians come out to watch him and they get real excited, and then if he feeds off it, and it's a great theater. It's like a sensation in the sport.
Is he playing at Monte Carlo this week? Do you know?
I don't think so. I haven't looked at the draw there. I'm at the Sarasota Open every day, but I don't. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if he is.
And that Mensick, I only first saw Mensick last week in the final against Djokovic, and he's something special as well. Yes, like you say, that these guys come. You got used to Sinner and Alcaraz, and already there's this new guys coming through.
I first saw Mensick play by accident. I went to U.S. Open qualies a year and a half ago. Fonini was playing. I went to watch Fonini because he's always fun to watch.
Yeah.
Character guy. And he was playing Mensick, and Fonini won the first set easily, 6-1. And I just stayed to watch, and then I thought it was going to be a quick one. And all of a sudden, Mensick, he never threw his racket, never got upset. He just stayed composed, poised, even though he lost 6-1 first set. All of a sudden, I don't know what he did differently. He just stopped missing, and he won the next two sets against Fonini 6-1, 6-1. And Fonini was desperate. Fonini was desperate to get his career back on track, get his ranking back up. Yeah. And Mensick just dominated him. At 17, I think he was 17, just turned 18. That was impressive.
I've seen Mensick play that one match against Djokovic, and I didn't see a weakness. What is his weakness? Does he have a weakness? I was like, what does this guy do badly? I can't. He's huge. He moves like he's not huge. He's got weapons on both sides. Huge. Yeah.
They say his forehand has got some kind of a little hitch to it or something.
Okay.
But yeah.
Didn't notice that. Okay. Brilliant. All right, Scoop. Look. So where, if people are watching this and they want to go find more of you, where should they go for your tennis content or your boxing content or anything else?
Most of my tennis is at my website, tennis-pros.com, Prose. And then my boxing site is ringobserver.com. I also still do a lot of Biophile interviews, and that's mrbiophile.com.
Brilliant. Okay.
MRBIOFILE.
Brilliant. We'll put it in the descriptions. Anything else you want to finish off on either the boxing or the tennis or anything else from your vast experience?
No, but are you really a Dodgers fan?
No, the British people just wear American caps as a thing. Yeah, is this even the real color for the Dodgers?
It is. Yeah, it's a cool hat. Yeah.
Okay. I'll next time I'm gonna pretend to be a Dodgers fan. No, afraid not.
Have you ever been to Los Angeles Dodger Stadium?
No, I've flown through LA on the way to Vegas, but never stopped. No, I've been in New York 3 times. Been to the U.S. Open tennis. I've been to Vegas. I was at MGM Grand for De La Hoya Mayweather. So all my American trips have been for tennis or boxing.
U.S. Open. Yeah, well, who did you see? What year was U.S. Open?
Oh, it's dreadful. I was so excited. It was 2010-ish. We had the middle Saturday, so the evening tickets, middle Saturday. John Isner was playing Tommy Robredo, and it was just it went on for 6 hours. It was tedious, and then we had James Blake play the American guy. Obviously, they put James Blake on against someone else, and it was the most disappointing 6 hours of tennis I've ever seen. So,
well, the middle Saturday is the best day of the tournament, actually.
That's what I was told. But I went to the French Open and I saw Djokovic Nadal play for 5 hours in a semi-final about 10 years ago, and McEnroe said it's the best clay court match he's ever seen, and I was courtside for that. So you win some, you lose some.
I'll give you a tip. The best time to go to the U.S. Open actually is qualies, the qualifying tournament.
Nice, yeah. Just because, you don't get the crowds and
don't get the crowds. You get the qualifying matches, the 3 rounds where they're trying to get into the main draw, and then you get to see the big players practicing around. And everybody's so excited that the U.S. Open is finally here. It's different energy, but the first week is so crowded, just too crowded. You have to wait the lines to get in the courts.
Yeah,
and then you're like sardines in there.
It's a crazy stadium though. I mean, it's huge. I'm so glad I've been, but yeah, the tennis wasn't great. Have you been to Wimbledon?
Twice.
Yeah, who have you seen there? I
saw Sampras play.
Oh wow!
I remember Sampras against Byron Balak.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I saw, but my standout memory is I queued the first time. I was in the
yeah.
And the next morning before the first day, it was the first day. Got center court seats, by the way, front row.
Wow.
And but I remember the biggest memory about that tournament was seeing a purple Lamborghini or a Ferrari drive by the queue, and it was Nassim Hamed.
Oh no! Amazing. Brilliant. Yeah, classic. Worth it for that. I saw when I was at the Mayweather De La Hoya fight 2007. I saw 50 Cent walk past me. And I was like, yo, Fiddy. And he gave me a fist bump. That was nice. Yeah. Brilliant, Scoop. Look, really enjoyed talking to you. I'm gonna write up my review when I finish this because it's absolutely brilliant stuff, really insightful and really well written, and I'm loving it.
Thank you very much. You finished it, or you still got a few pages?
Halfway through, like, you can see I've written, I've like marked every bit that I'm like, oh, I want to go and research that, and I'm just going through it in great detail because I then go and I go and look up the facts to like see what you were talking about. So I'm really taking it like a proper project. But I'm halfway through.
Hey, I got to tell you this. After the book came, I gave Emmanuel Stewart a copy at New York at a press conference, and because he's prominently in the book. And I knew he would like it because he's a big part of it, the fight. And then I never forget, on a Monday night, 10:30 at night, phone rings. I pick up the phone, and it's Emmanuel Stewart calling me up. He's saying, Scoop, your book is a smashing success. I was on the flight. It was after Mayweather Hatton fight. I was on the flight, and all the Brits, the first edition had 2 boxing gloves. It was a red cover. It was all the Brits had your book. They're asking me to sign it. It's a smashing success. It's one of the 2 best boxing books I ever read.
Wow.
I'll never forget that moment, man. Emmanuel Stewart was one of the greatest people in the sport.
You won't get a better accolade than that. That's amazing. And I'm amazed I'd not heard of it before.
Yeah, I didn't get Boxing News. I used to write for Boxing News too. Did biofiles with them for many years. They didn't really promote it or mention it. I didn't get the promotion that I felt it deserved. But maybe someday it still will.
Yeah. Well, I got it on Amazon in the UK. You sent me the US link, and I thought I was going to have to do like Donald Trump shipping charges, but no, I got it on UK Amazon. Arrived in a day. Love it.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant. All right, Scoop. I hope to talk to you again soon, and keep doing what you do.
Keep in touch, mate. Yes. Great to meet you.
You too. Take care, Scoop.